The clock ticks past midnight, its rhythmic sound echoing in a dimly lit security room. A single desk lamp flickers, revealing the tired eyes of a man in a wrinkled uniform. He sits before a wall of monitors, each screen glowing faintly, showing empty hallways, deserted parking lots, and the quiet hum of a sleeping world. The night is still, yet every sound feels amplified. The whir of the air conditioner, the static buzz from an old intercom, the faint pop of electricity struggling through aged wiring. The man leans back, rubbing his temples, the caffeine from his third cup of coffee doing little to keep away the chill creeping down his spine. He begins speaking, his voice low, as if afraid of waking something unseen. Most people think the night shift's easy. Sit, watch, report. But they don't understand what happens when the rest of the world sleeps. The silence, it starts whispering. The shadows, they move differently when you're alone. His tone is heavy, half confession, half warning. He gazes at the monitors again, the light reflecting off his weary face. On one screen, a motion sensor flickers for a moment, then goes still. He doesn't react. He's seen it before. But tonight, it feels different. Rain taps softly against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog howls. The security guard lets out a breath and continues. I've worked nights for 15 years. Hospitals, warehouses, shopping malls, you name it. Each place has its own kind of quiet. But I've learned something over time. The quiet never stays empty for long. His hand trembles slightly as he reaches for the intercom mic, then pulls back, unsure why. He looks toward the hallway beyond the door, a long stretch of dim light ending in blackness. The buzzing of the fluorescent lamp grows louder, steady, like a pulse. He adjusts the volume on his radio, hearing faint static. For a second, the static twists into something else, almost like a voice whispering his name. He freezes, every hair on his arm standing on end. The noise fades. He exhales shakily, muttering, "Just the signal, nothing more." But his eyes betray the lie wide, darting between screens, searching for movement. One of the monitors glitches, flashing white before showing a grainy image. The outside dumpster area, faintly illuminated by a single floodlight. The camera crackles, static rippling across the feed. For a split second, something dark flickers in the corner of the frame. A shadow, tall and still. The guard squints, leaning closer, but the image returns to normal. Empty. He leans back slowly, heartbeat steadying. You spend enough time in the dark, he whispers, and you start to wonder who's watching who. He looks directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall. These stories I'm about to tell you, they're not rumors. They're not internet myths. They're real. I heard them from guards like me, people who've seen things they can't explain. 11 stories. 11 nights that changed everything. The flickering lights dim slightly as the hum of the monitors deepens into an almost rhythmic pulse. The camera pans across the security room, coffee cups, an old walkie-talkie, a binder labeled Incident Reports, and a single monitor showing a new feed coming to life. The faint sound of wind grows louder, blending into the static. On the screen, a dark parking lot comes into focus, a lonely dumpster standing under the flickering floodlight. The guard stares, the reflection of the monitor glowing in his eyes. The shadow appears again, this time closer. He doesn't blink. A faint smile crosses his lips, one part fear, one part anticipation. "Let's begin," he murmurs. The lights buzz violently, the sound rising in intensity before cutting out completely. For a heartbeat, everything is black. Then one monitor flickers back to life, and the first story begins to play, its audio crackling through the static as if the night itself has chosen to speak. The scene opens with the low hum of a dying light bulb above an empty mall parking lot. The security guard, Daniel, steps out of his booth, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the thin layer of mist that clings to the asphalt. He's young, early 20s, just a few months into his new night job. The mall is closed, its massive glass doors reflecting the flickering security lights. The air smells faintly of wet concrete and gasoline. Somewhere in the distance, a stray shopping cart rattles, pushed by the breeze. Daniel walks his usual route, noting how empty the place feels. The silence is deep, almost unnatural, like the whole area has been drained of sound. His radio hisses softly with static. As he rounds the corner toward the dumpsters behind the mall, his flashlight catches a faint movement, a long, narrow shape against the far wall. He freezes. It's motionless now, but it doesn't look like a person. It's too thin, too tall. The floodlight above the dumpster flickers, casting a twitching shadow that seems to stretch and twist each time the light dims. He steadies his breathing and takes a step closer, muttering to himself, "Probably just a trick of the light." His boots scrape softly on the pavement. The smell of old garbage and oil fills his nose. He shines the flashlight directly toward the shape, but the light cuts through only mist. Nothing's there. His heart slows, and he forces a shaky laugh. I really gotta stop watching horror movies. He turns back toward the building, unaware that his own shadow now lags a split second behind him, slightly delayed in its movement. Back in the security room, Daniel scrolls through the camera feeds. The monitors glow in the dim light, showing empty corridors, empty stairwells, and the deserted parking lot. Then he sees it on camera 4 by the dumpster, a shadow standing perfectly still. His mouth goes dry. The timestamp reads 2:11 a.m. The shape is humanoid but distorted, its edges shifting like smoke. He switches to another angle, but the camera glitches. When the feed stabilizes, the shadow is gone. He checks the hallway camera next. For just an instant, a dark blur crosses behind him on the monitor. Daniel spins around, the creak of his chair echoing through the room. No one's there. The air feels colder suddenly, a chill creeping up his arms. The fluorescent lights overhead buzz, then pop, one of them going out completely. The screens flicker again, the feeds glitching in and out like something interfering with the signal. He radios in to his supervisor, no response. Static hisses through the speaker, followed by a faint, rhythmic sound. A breath. He listens, frozen, as a low voice whispers, "Outside." His chest tightens. He grabs his flashlight and heads for the exit, forcing himself to keep calm. The night air hits him hard, cold and heavy. The mist is thicker now, coiling around his legs. The dumpster area is silent except for the distant dripping of rainwater from the roof. He steps forward slowly, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam passes over the dumpster, empty space, and then catches something darker behind it. The same shadow, impossibly tall, pressed against the wall. Daniel's breathing grows shallow. He takes another step, but the shadow moves. It slides across the wall, bending at impossible angles, stretching toward him. His flashlight flickers, then dies. In the darkness, he hears a scraping sound, like nails dragging across concrete. He backs away, tripping over a piece of broken wood. He hits the ground hard, the flashlight rolling out of reach. For a moment, everything is black. Then the floodlight above the dumpster snaps on again, and the wall is empty. Just bricks, wet and glistening under the pale light. Daniel scrambles to his feet, breathing fast. "I'm done," he mutters. "I'm done with this shift." He rushes back to the security office, locking the door behind him. His hands shake as he sits down, replaying the camera footage from moments ago. The monitor shows the same spot he stood. Only now the shadow remains in frame, directly beside him, its head slowly turning toward the camera. He stares in disbelief, his own reflection pale in the screen. The recording continues for several seconds before static consumes the feed. The radio on his desk crackles once more. This time, the same low whisper says, "Inside." His heart drops. He slowly turns his head toward the far corner of the room. The air grows heavier. A shape darker than the shadows lingers there, still and silent. Daniel doesn't move. The power flickers, the monitors flash, and then the screen cuts to black. The narrator's voice returns, calm but trembling. He quit the next morning. But when they reviewed the security tapes, every night after that still showed movement near the dumpster. The same shape, standing a little closer to the booth each time. The faint hum of static rises, merging into the background sound of the next story beginning. The elevator hums softly in the darkened lobby of the high-rise office tower, its digital floor indicator frozen on the number 1. Michael, a seasoned security guard in his late 40s, sips lukewarm coffee from a paper cup as he watches the night drag on. The building is eerily still. Empty cubicles, dead computers, and the low buzz of fluorescent lights echoing through polished marble corridors. He's worked this job for years, and nothing surprises him anymore. But lately, something has been off. He's started hearing the elevator move on its own, long after all the employees have left. He sits behind the reception desk, tapping through the security camera feeds on his monitor. Everything looks normal until the elevator light suddenly flickers to life. The display reads B3. Michael frowns. The building only has 2 basements, B1 and B2. He leans closer, squinting at the small monitor showing the elevator interior. The doors open to reveal a dimly lit corridor that he doesn't recognize. Concrete walls, no paint, no signage. Just an unfinished hallway stretching into darkness. The timestamp on the feed freezes for a second before jumping forward 3 seconds, as if something was edited out. The radio on his belt lets out a brief hiss of static. He picks it up, his voice steady but tired. Control to maintenance. I think there's an electrical issue with the elevator system again. No reply. He taps the button again, listening to the hollow static that follows. Then, faintly, through the distortion, he hears something else. A faint tapping sound, rhythmic like footsteps echoing in a tunnel. His brow furrows. Against his better judgment, Michael decides to check it out. The elevator doors slide open with a mechanical sigh. He steps inside, the air inside cool and metallic. The overhead light flickers weakly. He presses the B1 button. But before the doors close, another button lights up on its own, B3. The elevator shudders slightly, then begins to descend. He stares at the control panel, watching as the digital display blinks erratically between floors. The faint hum of the machinery grows deeper, vibrating through the walls. When the doors open, a rush of cold air greets him. The corridor before him is unfinished, raw concrete and rebar jutting from the ceiling. The walls are damp, the smell of mold thick in the air. The lights overhead flicker, buzzing in and out of life. He steps out cautiously, flashlight raised. The beam reveals dusty footprints leading down the hall. His boots crunch over old debris as he follows them. The further he goes, the more he feels it. Something about the air down here doesn't feel right. It's heavy, almost charged. He pauses when he hears faint breathing somewhere ahead. "Hello?" he calls out, his voice echoing down the corridor. The sound that comes back isn't an echo. It's a whisper, low and drawn out. "Hello?" He freezes. The voice sounds exactly like his own. A shiver runs through his spine. He turns back toward the elevator, but the hallway now seems longer than before, stretching far beyond where it should end. The light flickers again, and in that brief darkness, he catches movement. A shadow at the edge of his flashlight's reach, standing still. He raises the beam, but the space is empty again. The tapping starts once more, closer this time. A steady, deliberate pace. He backs away slowly, gripping his flashlight tight. "This isn't funny," he mutters. The tapping stops. Silence. Then, from the elevator intercom speaker above the doors, a distorted voice crackles through. It's his voice. "Don't leave yet, Michael." His blood runs cold. The flashlight flickers, his breath quickens. He runs for the elevator, slamming the close button repeatedly. The doors crawl shut, and just as they meet, he sees it. Something standing at the end of the hallway. It looks like him, same uniform, same face, but pale and expressionless. The elevator jerks upward violently. The lights go out. For a long moment, he stands in complete darkness, the sound of the elevator cables groaning above. Then the display flickers back on. B4. He stares at it in disbelief. The building doesn't have a B4. The elevator slows, then stops. The doors open to pitch blackness. He hears the faint sound of breathing again, close this time, just beyond the threshold. He backs against the wall, fumbling for the emergency switch, but the panel sparks under his touch. The intercom buzzes again, that same warped version of his voice whispering, "Almost there." The elevator lurches upward once more before jolting to a stop at the ground floor. The doors open to the familiar lobby, silent and still. Michael stumbles out, gasping for air. The coffee cup still sits on the desk, exactly where he left it. Everything looks normal. He exhales shakily, laughing under his breath. "Never again," he mutters, grabbing his jacket. But before leaving, he glances back at the elevator one last time. The doors stand open, waiting. The digital display slowly changes from 1 to B3, then B4. The lights in the lobby flicker. Michael turns and walks quickly toward the exit. The camera feed in the security office flickers back on, showing the elevator interior. The doors close, and standing inside is Michael, still facing forward, motionless. The narrator's voice breaks the silence, calm but cold. He never took that elevator again, but sometimes at 3 a.m. it still arrives at the lobby empty, except for a reflection that doesn't move. The faint echo of a bell chime rings out as the story fades into static. The department store lies in silence after closing hours, its wide aisles stretching endlessly under flickering fluorescent lights. The mannequins stand frozen in perfect posture, dressed in the latest fashion, their glassy eyes staring blankly into the dark. Sam, the night security guard, walks the floor with a slow, cautious pace. He's been doing this shift for only a week, and already the silence has begun to gnaw at him. His radio crackles occasionally, breaking the stillness, but otherwise, it's just the sound of his boots echoing off tile and the faint hum of the air conditioning. He turns a corner into the women's section and stops. One of the mannequins is facing the wrong way. He frowns, remembering he passed this very spot earlier. He could swear that mannequin had been turned toward the entrance, not the back wall. He steps closer, his flashlight sweeping across the display. The figure stands motionless, arms slightly bent, the shine of its plastic skin dull under the flickering light. He shrugs it off, muttering to himself, "Probably one of the cleaners moved it," but deep down something about it feels wrong. The angle of its head, the curve of its lips, almost like a smirk. He continues his patrol, forcing himself to whistle softly, just to break the silence. As he rounds the next corner, the motion sensor light flickers on ahead of him. His flashlight catches another mannequin, this one lying on the floor as if it had fallen. He sighs, setting his flashlight down to prop it back up. As his hands touch the smooth plastic surface, a jolt runs through him. The mannequin surface is cold, too cold, almost like ice. He quickly withdraws his hand, shaking it out, the chill still lingering in his fingers. "Man, this place gives me the creeps," he mutters, standing the figure upright again. As he steps back, something clatters behind him. He spins around, his flashlight beam lands on another mannequin now standing in the center of the aisle. He hadn't seen that one there before. It's positioned awkwardly, one arm raised, as if reaching toward him. His throat tightens. "Okay," he whispers, half laughing. "Who's messing with me?" The store is empty. He knows it is. He checked every door, every hallway. Still, the silence feels different now. Thicker, heavier, like it's watching him. He heads back to the security office to check the cameras. On screen, everything looks normal at first. Then he spots it. One of the mannequins in the clothing section turns its head slightly when the lights flicker. He rewinds the footage, squinting. The head definitely moves, a small but distinct shift in direction. "No," he murmurs. "No way." He plays the clip again, slower this time, frame by frame. The mannequin's head turns a little more each time the light flickers until, finally, it faces directly into the camera. Sam leans closer, his breath fogging the monitor. On screen, something glints in the mannequin's eye, like the reflection of someone standing right behind it. But when he checks the live feed, the figure has changed position entirely, now standing near the dressing rooms. His stomach twists. He grabs his flashlight and heads back into the store, muttering, "It's just the lights. It has to be." The dressing room area is dim, the mirrors reflecting long, distorted versions of himself. He walks past the stalls, each one empty. Then he hears it, a faint scraping sound. He turns, shining the light toward the source. The mannequin from before now stands just a few feet away, its plastic hand brushing the wall. He stumbles back, dropping the flashlight. It rolls, spinning the beam across the floor. In the shifting light, the mannequin's head turns toward him with a soft creak. His heart pounds. He rushes back, slamming the door to the security office shut behind him. His hands shake as he locks it and turns back to the monitors. Every camera feed now shows mannequins, lined up in the aisles, all facing the same direction, toward the office. The air grows colder. He can hear faint tapping on the other side of the door, slow and deliberate, like fingers drumming against the metal. Then silence. Minutes pass. Sam sits frozen, eyes fixed on the monitors. The mannequins haven't moved. He leans closer to the screen, trying to convince himself it's all in his head. Then, one by one, the mannequins on the feed start to lift their arms, in perfect unison. The lights flicker violently, and when they steady again, the office door camera shows something that makes his blood run cold. One of the mannequins is standing directly outside, its face pressed against the glass. The power cuts out. Everything goes dark. In the pitch black, Sam hears the door handle rattle, followed by a slow, creaking sound. He grabs his flashlight. Turning it on, the beam lands on the far corner of the room. A mannequin head rests on his desk, facing him. Its painted eyes stare blankly, but there's something wet glistening beneath them, like condensation or tears. The narrator's voice returns, soft and grave. They found him the next morning. The cameras showed no intruders, but one mannequin was missing from inventory, and in the break room, they found its head sitting neatly on the table, facing the security camera. The old psychiatric hospital looms like a concrete skeleton on the edge of town, surrounded by rusting fences and overgrown grass. The no trespassing signs are faded, the paint peeling off metal gates that creak with every gust of wind. Inside the small security booth by the main gate, Jacob adjusts his uniform collar and checks his radio for the third time. The night has fallen heavy, the kind that swallows light whole. His flashlight beam feels weak against the darkness pressing in from all sides. He's been assigned to watch the perimeter of the property for 6 months now, just another forgotten relic of the city's past. But lately, he's been hearing things that shouldn't be there. It starts like it always does. The quiet hum of his radio, the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel, the sighing wind slipping through broken windows of the abandoned wards. But tonight there's something else. A voice, a faint one, bleeding through the static of his walkie-talkie. Ward C, report in. He stops walking. Say again, he replies, but only static answers. He stares up at the main building, the long, decaying wings stretching out from the central tower. The windows are black holes reflecting no light. The problem is, Ward C doesn't exist anymore. It was demolished 10 years ago after a fire gutted that side of the asylum. He knows that. Everyone does. He continues walking, trying to shake the chill creeping down his neck. The gravel crunches beneath his boots, and the beam of his flashlight catches rusted wheelchairs half buried in weeds. He tells himself it's just interference, a glitch in the signal. But as he reaches the corner of the old administration building, his radio crackles again. This time louder. Perimeter secure. All clear. Ward C reporting. The voice is steady, calm, professional, his own voice. Jacob freezes. His hand tightens around the radio. Who is this? He demands. Silence. Then a faint laugh like static turned human. His breath fogs in the cold air as he steps through the broken fence that separates the main grounds from the demolished wing. The flashlight beam cuts through clouds of dust drifting from the rubble. A half-collapsed archway still bears the faded words, Ward C. His boots echo against the cracked tiles as he steps inside what remains of the corridor. The smell of damp concrete and rot fills his lungs. The walls are scorched, the ceiling caved in spots, but the air carries something else too. A low hum, like electricity humming from nowhere. He moves deeper, his radio still in hand. Ward C to base, a voice says again. He stops. Base to Ward C. he answers, trying to keep his tone steady. Identify yourself. The reply comes instantly, matching his own speech pattern, word for word, tone for tone. Base toward C. Identify yourself. He feels his blood run cold. The voice overlaps his, repeating him in real time now, like an echo chasing his words through the static. The corridor narrows ahead. The flashlight flickers, and for a split second, he sees a shadow move at the far end. He angles the beam toward it, but there's nothing there, only an old gurney half buried under debris. The air grows thicker, heavy with humidity. Then, faintly, he hears footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate, coming from the direction of the collapsed ward. Hello! His voice trembles slightly. The steps stop. Silence. Then the radio hisses violently, erupting in static that peaks like a scream. He drops it, clutching his ears, his pulse hammering in his chest. When the static fades, the corridor feels different, like the air itself is vibrating. He picks up the radio again, his hand shaking. On the small digital screen, the channel number flickers between 3 and 13, even though there are only 10 available frequencies. No way, he whispers. The beam of his flashlight catches something ahead. Faint light spilling from a doorway that shouldn't exist. He hesitates, then steps closer. The door is marked C107, though the paint is almost gone. He pushes it open, and the light inside flickers like a dying bulb. The room is empty except for an old hospital bed and a single chair beside it. On the wall, faint words are scratched into the plaster. We never left. The air turns cold enough for his breath to fog thickly. The radio clicks again, followed by whispering. Multiple voices now, speaking in broken phrases. We're still here. Don't leave. Ward C secure. Jacob backs away, heart pounding, tripping over debris. His flashlight falls, the beam spinning across the floor until it points directly under the bed. For a moment, he sees something pale lying there. An arm, thin and still. He scrambles to his feet, grabbing his light, but the space beneath the bed is empty now. He bolts from the room, running down the corridor, his radio still crackling with overlapping whispers of his own voice. The sound follows him all the way back to the gate, where he finally drops the device onto the dirt. The static cuts off instantly. He gasps for air, his chest heaving. For a moment, the night feels silent again. But then the radio on his belt, one he'd turned off hours ago, crackles softly. A voice, low and calm, speaks. Perimeter secured. All clear. Ward C reporting. The narrator's voice cuts in, quiet but deliberate. They found his patrol notes the next morning. The last entry read only 2 words. Ward C active. No one was assigned there that night. No one ever would be again. The faint hum of static fades into silence as the next story begins. The warehouse stands at the edge of the industrial district, a sprawling maze of metal and concrete. Its corridors stretch endlessly, echoing with the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the mechanical whir of distant conveyor belts. The place feels alive in a way it shouldn't. Every creak of metal, every hollow clang from the rafters sounds like a breath being drawn somewhere in the dark. Inside, 2 security guards, Rick and Javier, begin their shift. They've worked here for months, and though the hours are long, the pay is good. Still, something about tonight feels wrong. It starts small, barely noticeable. A sensor light near Section 9 flickers on even though the motion detectors haven't registered movement. Rick radios in to the control booth. Probably a rat again. Javier laughs from the next aisle over. Man, these old systems always act up. You worry too much. But the light doesn't shut off. It stays glowing, pulsing faintly, like something breathing just beyond its reach. Rick decides to check it out. He walks between towering stacks of crates marked with faded labels. Shipping, fragile, do not open, each one coated in years of dust. The air smells of oil and old cardboard. His flashlight beam sweeps across the shelves, landing on a pallet jack abandoned mid-aisle. He frowns. Javi, did anyone work in Section 9 today? The reply crackles over the radio. No one. That area's been sealed since last week. Rick stops. The light ahead flickers twice, then dies. The hum of the warehouse deepens into silence. Somewhere behind him, a crate shifts slightly with a hollow thud. He spins around, beam trembling. Javier? You near me? No answer. Just static. He starts to walk back toward the main corridor when he hears it. A metallic dragging sound, slow and heavy, like something being pulled across the floor. His pulse quickens. Javier, come on, man. You hearing this? Moments later, Javier rounds the corner, flashlight in hand, smirking. Relax, dude. Probably just a rat dragging a pipe or something. Rick shakes his head, unease flickering in his eyes. That was no rat. Together, they head toward the sound, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The dragging noise stops. They reach the sealed section, a tall chain-link gate locked with a heavy padlock. Beyond it, only darkness. Javier tests the lock. It's solid. See? No one's been in there, he says, but his voice wavers. The air feels colder near the gate, thick with the smell of rust. Then, suddenly, the sound starts again, this time from behind them. They turn simultaneously, flashlights crossing beams on a row of crates stacked 6 feet high. A faint outline moves between them, too quick to catch fully. Rick curses under his breath. Someone's in here. He rushes toward the crates, turning the corner, nothing. Just empty aisles. But when he looks down, he freezes. In the layer of dust coating the floor, a fresh set of footprints leads deeper into the warehouse. The prints are barefoot. They follow the trail cautiously, flashlights cutting through the dark. It leads them to a forgotten loading dock, where the lights above flicker dimly. The air is colder here, every breath visible. A row of old shipping crates sits along the wall, their metal surfaces dented and faded. One of them is different, newer, cleaner, with a security tag that reads "Return Pending." Javier steps forward, running his hand over the label. Ha! No record of this one. Rick peers closer, noticing faint scratches on the surface, like fingernail marks. Without warning, the radio on Javier's belt bursts to life with static, followed by a distorted voice. Section 9, breach detected. Both men jump. Rick raises his flashlight toward the crate. You think someone's inside? Javier swallows hard. There's no way. But the moment he says it, a dull thud echoes from within the crate. Then another, a slow, rhythmic pounding. They back away as the crate shudders violently. Rick grabs his radio. Base, we need backup at Warehouse 9. Something's... Static cuts him off. The pounding stops. The silence afterward is suffocating. Then, with a sharp metallic screech, the front panel of the crate bulges outward, like something pressing from the inside. Both men freeze, unable to move. The crate bursts open slightly at the seam, and a piece of cloth flutters out. A torn patch of a security uniform. Javier bends to pick it up, and his face drains of color. The name stitched on the tag is his. The lights above flicker rapidly now, strobing the scene in jerky flashes. For an instant, Rick sees something inside the crate. Pale skin, unmoving eyes. Then the power cuts. Everything goes black. They hear movement, soft footsteps circling them in the dark. Too light to be human. Rick fumbles for his flashlight, hands trembling. When the beam flickers on, Javier is gone. Only his radio lies on the floor, hissing with static. Rick backs away slowly, heart racing, scanning the darkness. Then, from the far end of the aisle, a figure steps into the light. It's Javier. But his uniform is torn, his face blank, his movements jerky, unnatural. Javi! Rick whispers. The figure tilts its head, the radio on its belt crackling to life again. A voice, identical to Rick's, whispers through it. You shouldn't have opened it. Rick stumbles backward, dropping his flashlight. The beam rolls across the floor, flashing on the broken crate. Inside, a second security uniform lies neatly folded. The name tag reads Rick. The screen fades to static as the narrator's voice cuts in softly. When the morning shift arrived, both guards were missing. Only the cameras were left running. And at 3:12 a.m., The feed showed two figures patrolling the aisles, wearing the same uniforms, moving in perfect unison. The night shift at the community cemetery was supposed to be easy, quiet, predictable, almost peaceful. Thomas had taken the job after his divorce, hoping that the silence would give him space to think, to breathe, to escape the noise of the city and his own memories. The cemetery was small but old, tucked behind a line of trees on the edge of town. During the day, it looked almost serene, the marble headstones gleaming under the sun, the air filled with the smell of cut grass. But at night, everything changed. The air grew dense, the shadows stretched too far, and the silence felt alive, as if listening. Thomas's shift began at midnight. He carried a flashlight and a small thermos of coffee, walking his usual route through the front gates, past the caretaker's shed, and down toward the older section where the graves dated back more than a century. He liked this part the most. Something about the age of it, the forgotten names, the sense of history buried in the ground. But tonight, as soon as he stepped past the main archway, he felt it. A weight in the air, subtle but unmistakable. It was as if the cemetery itself was holding its breath. He brushed it off at first. Maybe the fog rolling in from the hills was just thicker than usual. Still, his flashlight beam seemed weaker tonight, swallowed by the mist that curled low across the ground. He could barely see 10 feet ahead. The rows of gravestones emerged from the fog like crooked teeth, each one casting long, wavering shadows. His radio crackled once in his pocket, though no one was on the other end. He ignored it and kept walking, his boots crunching on the damp gravel path. Halfway through his route, he noticed something strange. The air was colder now, unnaturally cold. His breath came out in visible clouds, even though it was late summer. Then he heard it. A faint metallic sound, like a gate swinging somewhere in the distance. He turned toward it, scanning with his flashlight. The beam caught movement, something small and quick darting behind a mausoleum. He froze. Probably just a stray cat, he whispered to himself, forcing a shaky laugh. But deep down, he wasn't convinced. He approached the mausoleum. Its stone door cracked open slightly. The air spilling from the gap was icy and dry, carrying the faintest smell of decay. He hesitated before pushing it open, the hinges shrieking like a scream. Inside, it was pitch black except for his flashlight beam catching dust motes in the air. The crypts along the walls were sealed, names carved in Old Latin script. Everything seemed undisturbed until he saw the footprints. Fresh ones, bare, damp, leading deeper inside. His pulse quickened. He backed out, shining the light over the ground. The prints led away from the mausoleum now, toward the far corner of the graveyard where the caretaker's shed stood. He followed slowly, heart hammering in his chest. As he neared the shed, the fog grew thicker, coiling around his legs. The door was wide open, creaking softly in the wind. From inside came a faint scratching sound, like someone dragging their nails across wood. "Hello?" he called. No answer. He stepped inside, sweeping the beam around. Tools hung from the walls, shovels, rakes, hedge clippers, all perfectly still. Then, in the corner, he saw the source of the scratching. The coffin. An old, wooden one, half covered by a tarp. He frowned, kneeling beside it. What the hell? The lid wasn't sealed. It sat askew, as though someone had pried it open from the inside. He reached out, fingers trembling, and lifted it slightly. Inside was empty, just a hollow imprint in the lining, and a nameplate nailed to the lid. Thomas Graves. His own name. He stumbled back, knocking over a bucket. Panic flared in his chest. "Who's there?" he shouted. The radio on his belt came alive with static. Through it, a voice whispered faintly, "You're late." The flashlight flickered violently, then died completely, plunging him into darkness. His breathing grew ragged as the scratching sound returned, this time from directly behind him. He spun around, but saw nothing, just blackness pressing in on all sides. Then, faintly, he heard shuffling footsteps moving around him in the fog, circling. He bolted from the shed, running blindly toward the main gate. The fog was so thick now it felt solid, like he was pushing through water. Shadows moved within it, tall, shifting shapes that never fully appeared, but always lingered just at the edge of vision. He tripped and fell hard onto the gravel, scraping his hands. The flashlight rolled away, flickering weakly before dying again. For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the fog. It was a man wearing a security uniform identical to his. The same badge, the same flashlight hanging from the belt. The only difference was the pale, waxy skin and the way the man's mouth hung open slightly, as if trying to form words that never came. Thomas scrambled backward. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head, eyes glinting faintly in the darkness. "I told you," the voice whispered, not from the figure, but from Thomas's own radio. "You're late." The figure stepped closer, the sound of its boots crunching the gravel in perfect sync with Thomas's heartbeat. Its face began to change, slowly, subtly, until it was his own. Same eyes, same hair, same terrified expression. Thomas froze, paralyzed with disbelief. The figure raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the graves behind him. "It's time," it said. The ground beneath Thomas shuddered. He turned to see a row of graves opening, soil shifting, wood creaking as lids slid aside. From each one, pale arms reached out. He screamed, stumbling to his feet, running through the fog with no sense of direction. His breath tore through his throat, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would burst. Behind him, he heard the sound of footsteps, hundreds of them, moving in perfect unison. He burst through the front gate and didn't stop running until he saw the lights of the town in the distance. The next morning, the police found his patrol car idling by the entrance. The gates were wide open. His flashlight lay on the path, its beam still on, pointing directly at a freshly dug grave. The headstone was new, the letters carved deep and precise. Thomas Graves, 1983 to 2024, Faithful Watchman. The camera fades out slowly as the narrator's voice lowers to a whisper. They say sometimes the cemetery keeps its own watch, and when it does, it always replaces the one who leaves. The power plant was a forgotten relic of the 1970s, a rusted monument to an industrial age that had long since passed. Miles from the nearest town, its skeletal towers and hollow silos stood against the night sky like blackened teeth. The air was thick with the stench of metal and oil. Only one generator still functioned barely, its low hum vibrating through the concrete like a slow, dying heartbeat. Marcus hated every minute of his night shifts there. The pay was good, but the silence was suffocating. He was the only guard assigned to the graveyard hours, watching over an empty facility that had been shut down years ago, except for one wing still used for research storage. The corridors inside were cold, lined with pipes that hissed softly as steam escaped from their joints. The lights flickered intermittently, leaving stretches of darkness between the pools of yellow light. Marcus made his rounds every hour, logging the same notes each time. No activity, all secure. The monotony was numbing, but it was better than the alternative, thinking about what happened in this place before it closed. The locals called it the Black Station. Rumors said an accident had occurred in the lower chambers years ago, something the company buried under concrete and silence. He used to laugh at the stories. Now, working alone at night, he wasn't so sure. At 2:17 a.m., the alarm panel in the control booth beeped once. Then again. Marcus frowned, leaning over the console. The screen flickered, showing a motion alert from Sublevel B. That was impossible. Sublevel B had been sealed off a decade ago. He grabbed his flashlight and radio, muttering, "Probably a glitch," though his voice trembled slightly. The stairs down to Sublevel B were behind a steel security door that hadn't been opened in years. But when he reached it, the heavy padlock was hanging open, the latch swinging slightly. A wave of cold air seeped from the gap under the door. The flashlight beam caught dust swirling in the draft. He radioed in, "Control, this is Marcus. I've got a breach at Sublevel B. Requesting confirmation." Static answered. The line was dead. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The hinges groaned. Beyond the threshold, the concrete stairs descended into blackness. The air smelled faintly of burnt plastic and something else. Something sour like decay. He started down, his footsteps echoing off the walls. The deeper he went, the colder it got. Each breath came out in fog. When he reached the bottom, the corridor stretched in both directions, unlit except for his flashlight beam. Old machinery sat in the corners, draped in cobwebs. The floor was slick with condensation. As he moved forward, he noticed something strange on the walls. Dark smears that looked almost like handprints. He raised the beam higher. They weren't painted. They were burned into the concrete, as if something had touched the walls with heat. A metallic clang echoed from ahead, making him jump. "Hello!" His voice cracked, swallowed quickly by the vast silence. The sound came again, from the far end of the hall. He approached slowly, his heartbeat loud in his ears. There was an open doorway leading into one of the old generator rooms. Inside, the massive turbines sat silent, their metal frames rusted and cold. But one of the control panels still glowed faintly. He moved closer, noticing that the switches were flipped to manual operation. "No way," he whispered. "This whole grid's been dead for years." He reached out to switch it off, but before his hand touched the lever, the overhead lights flickered violently. The machinery groaned, gears grinding deep within the floor. The air filled with a low rumbling, like something waking up after a long sleep. Marcus stumbled back. His radio hissed to life. Through the static came a voice, his supervisor's, but warped, echoing strangely. "Marcus, report. Sublevel B is off limits. Get out. Get out now." He turned and ran for the stairs, but the corridor was different now. It stretched farther than before, the door at the top impossibly distant. He sprinted, lungs burning, the sound of the turbines roaring behind him. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement, a shape standing in one of the side chambers. He stopped, the beam of his flashlight shaking. It was a person or something like one, tall and thin, its skin gray, its head tilted unnaturally. Its eyes caught the light, reflective, like an animal's. The figure stepped forward, its movements jerky, mechanical. Then another appeared behind it, identical. And another. Marcus backed away, heart slamming against his ribs. The lights overhead flickered faster, turning the corridor into a strobe of white and shadow. The figures moved in rhythm with the flashes, closer every time the light blinked. He turned and ran again, gasping for breath, his radio screaming with static and overlapping voices. He couldn't tell if they were real or in his head. When he finally reached the stairwell, the door was shut tight. He grabbed the handle and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. He slammed his shoulder into it again and again until the metal bent under the force. He squeezed through the gap, scraping his arms, emerging into the upper corridor. Everything was dark. No lights, no hum of machines, only silence. His flashlight flickered one last time before dying. He stood in total blackness, chest heaving, the sound of his own breathing deafening in the emptiness. Then, from behind him, a faint click. The turbines below began to spin again, slow and deliberate. The air vibrated. He turned around, eyes wide, and saw faint orange light spilling up the stairwell. The power plant was waking up. He ran for the exit, stumbling through the dark, until he burst out into the open air. The night sky stretched above him, but it wasn't silent anymore. The cooling towers were rumbling, the ground trembling beneath his feet. And then, faintly, from deep inside the plant, he heard a human voice cry out. The next morning, a cleanup crew arrived after reports of a power surge. They found the control booth empty, the equipment fried, and the stairwell to sublevel be sealed shut again, welded from the inside. Marcus's radio lay on the floor, still hissing faintly. A single phrase looped through the static. System restored. Personnel count 1. The narrator's voice returns, quiet and deliberate, carrying a tone of finality. The black station powered up for 12 minutes that night, its first surge in over 20 years. No one ever found out what started it, or what it powered. The amusement park had been closed for nearly a decade, its rides left to rot under layers of rust and peeling paint. Locals said the laughter never really stopped there. It just changed pitch, twisted into something that echoed through the dark after midnight. Darren didn't believe in ghost stories, but as the new night security guard assigned to Dreamland Park, he had started to understand why the old guards never lasted long. Every night, the wind carried faint music, broken notes from a carousel that hadn't turned in years. Every night, the air smelled faintly of burnt sugar and rain. It was his 5th night on duty when things started to change. The evening began as usual. He parked near the entrance, signed in, and began his patrol. The once colorful ticket booth stood like a skeleton under the flickering floodlights, its windows shattered, its sign barely legible. Dreamland, where smiles never fade. Darren smirked bitterly. Yeah, right? He walked through the gates, his boots crunching on broken glass and gravel. The fog was thicker than usual, swirling between the rides like slow-moving smoke. He passed the carousel first. Its horses stood frozen mid-gallop, paint chipped and eyes cracked. He paused, hearing the faint creak of chains swaying. The wind whispered through the empty park, and for a moment, he thought he heard laughter, distant, echoing, childlike. He shook it off, muttering, "Just the wind," and continued toward the Ferris wheel at the far end of the grounds. The massive wheel loomed over him, its rusted frame cutting through the fog. One of the cars still swung gently, creaking on its hinges. He raised his flashlight. The light caught something inside, a shape, small, human-sized. He stepped closer. The beam landed on an old mannequin, dressed in a faded park uniform, its plastic face split down the middle. He exhaled sharply, half laughing at himself. Jesus, they really left this here? He turned to leave, but the sound came again. Laughter. Closer this time. A child's giggle, followed by the faint jingle of carnival music. His breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" he called, flashlight shaking. No answer. The music grew louder, coming from the direction of the carousel he'd just passed. When he turned, he froze. The carousel was moving, slowly, almost dreamlike, its platform rotating, the horses bobbing up and down in perfect rhythm. The lights around it flickered on, one by one, painting the fog in a warm, golden glow. The song it played was warped, too slow, the notes bending out of tune. Darren stood still, staring. "No way," he whispered. "There's no power here." He approached cautiously, his boots crunching on the gravel. As he neared the ride, he noticed something strange. Footprints circling the carousel. Small ones, barefoot. They looked fresh. He crouched to examine them, his flashlight trembling in his hand. That's when he saw the movement. A small figure sitting on one of the horses, swaying gently as the carousel turned. "Hey!" he shouted, voice cracking. The figure didn't move. He took another step closer. It looked like a little girl, wearing a white dress that shimmered faintly under the flickering lights. Her hair hung over her face, unmoving despite the slow spin. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't be here," Darren said, his voice softening. "It's not safe." He reached for the switch box to stop the ride, but before he could touch it, the carousel lights went out, all at once. The music stopped. The air was dead silent. Then, from right beside him, a whisper, "Want a ride?" He spun around, flashlight beams slicing through the fog. Nothing. The carousel stood still again. The horse the girl had been sitting on now empty. His chest tightened. "This is not funny," he said, backing away. The radio on his belt crackled violently. Through the static came faint carnival music, distorted and looping. He tried to switch channels, but the sound only grew louder. Then a voice, soft and breathy, whispered through the static, "You're it." The Ferris wheel groaned behind him, the metal screeching as it began to turn on its own. He ran toward the main gate, but the fog had thickened so much that the path seemed to shift beneath his feet. He turned in circles, disoriented, the rides around him flickering on and off in flashes of color. Merry-go-round lights, arcade signs, the roller coaster's skeletal frame illuminated for seconds at a time. Then came the laughter again, Dozens of voices this time, overlapping, echoing from every direction. He clamped his hands over his ears, shouting, "Stop!" But it only grew louder. Shapes darted through the fog, children running, playing, their laughter sharp and hollow. One brushed past him, cold as ice. His flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of faces, smiling, frozen, too pale to be alive. He stumbled backward, tripping over something. When he looked down, his breath caught. It was a clown doll, its porcelain face cracked, one eye missing. It smiled up at him, teeth too human. He kicked it away and ran toward the exit gates, but they were gone. The fence stretched endlessly in both directions, disappearing into the fog. He turned back toward the center of the park, trying to retrace his steps. That's when the lights from the carousel flared back to life, spinning faster now, the music playing in reverse. And sitting on one of the horses was a figure in a security uniform. His uniform. The flashlight slipped from his hand, clattering to the ground. He approached slowly, heart hammering in his throat. The figure's head hung low, chin to chest. When he got close enough, he saw the face. It was him. Eyes open, skin gray, lips curled in a faint smile. The carousel spun faster, lights blurring, music screaming in distorted loops. He backed away, trembling, whispering, "No, no." Then everything stopped. The lights died, the music cut, the fog lifted in an instant. The carousel stood still again, empty. The park was silent. The next morning, police found the gates locked from the inside. Darren's car was parked in the lot, keys still in the ignition, engine cold. His logbook ended abruptly at 1:46 a.m. The last entry scrawled in shaky handwriting. The lights came back on. The investigators said there was no power source connected to any of the rides. But later that week, a maintenance worker reported seeing the carousel lights flicker on at dusk. And on one of the horses, a man in a security uniform, smiling as the ride turned slowly, endlessly. The narrator's voice fades in, low and somber. They say Dreamland Park was built on joy but fed by fear. And sometimes, when the fog is thick and the wind is still, you can still hear the laughter of those who never left the ride. The hospital stood on the outskirts of town, an old trauma center now converted into a long-term care facility. During the day, it buzzed with the soft chaos of nurses, patients, and rolling gurneys. But at night, it transformed. The lights dimmed to a sterile yellow, the halls fell silent, and the air felt heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. Miles, a 33-year-old security guard with a calm demeanor and tired eyes, had worked the night shift there for nearly a year. He'd seen enough strange things on the job. Alarms tripping with no cause, motion sensors triggered in empty wings, but he never gave them much thought. That is, until one night in late October, when something deep inside the building began to move again. The shift began quietly. Miles walked his usual route from the ER doors through the administrative wing, past the elevator that led down to the old psychiatric ward, a section closed off after a fire years ago. The company never renovated that part. They just sealed it and moved on. He passed the door as he always did, the faded B-wing. Restricted access sign barely clinging to the wall. Normally, he ignored it. But tonight, as he passed, the door creaked slightly. Just enough for him to notice the faintest gap where the seal had been broken. He frowned, checking his log tablet. No maintenance was scheduled. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. Then, from somewhere below, a faint sound drifted up through the old elevator shaft. A slow, rhythmic tapping. He hesitated. "Probably pipes," he muttered, forcing a laugh. But deep down, his stomach tightened. He radioed the front desk. "Hey, Tom. Anyone working in the B-wing tonight?" Static. Then a burst of noise, like a voice whispering too close to the mic. But no clear words. The channel went dead. Miles sighed and turned back toward the door. The tapping continued, steady, patient. He grabbed his flashlight and keyring, finding the one marked maintenance. It slid into the lock with surprising ease. The heavy door groaned open, releasing a gust of cold air that smelled faintly of antiseptic and something older, sourer. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a long hallway lined with rusted gurneys and peeling paint. The air was unnaturally still. He stepped inside. The walls were stained, the tiles cracked. Each footstep echoed like a heartbeat. The tapping grew louder, coming from deeper within the wing. As he walked, he noticed the faint outlines of old handprints along the walls, some smeared downward, as if dragged. The deeper he went, the colder it became. His breath fogged in the beam of his flashlight. A faint hum filled the air, low and vibrating, like distant machinery still running underground. He reached a junction where the corridor split in two. The tapping stopped. Miles turned in a slow circle. The silence was absolute, pressing against his ears. Then the intercom above him crackled to life. A woman's voice, calm and clipped, said, "Code Blue, Room 304. The sound made his heart leap into his throat. Room 304 was in the B-wing. He knew because he'd seen the old maps in the office. But this intercom system had been disconnected years ago. He stared up at the speaker, frozen. The voice came again, softer now. "Code Blue, Room 304. Patient unresponsive." He forced himself to move, heading down the left corridor. The signs on the walls were faded, but he could still make out the numbers. 301, 302, 303. The next door was barely hanging on its hinges. 304. The door was slightly ajar, light flickering from inside. His hand trembled as he pushed it open. The room looked untouched. An old hospital bed, overturned tray, papers scattered on the floor. The air felt thick, humid, and cold all at once. His flashlight swept across the bed and froze. There was someone lying there, a figure covered in a hospital sheet, still as stone. Miles took a shaky step closer. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. He reached out with the flashlight and gently lifted the sheet. The bed was empty, but the indentation remained, like someone had just been lying there. His radio burst to life suddenly, a distorted male voice crackling through. "Miles, do not respond." Then static. The lights flickered again, once, twice, and then everything went dark. He stood in pitch black, heart pounding, breath shallow. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes before the overhead fluorescent lights flickered back on. But something was different. The bed was upright now, and the sheet was gone. On the wall above it, words had been scrawled in something dark. "Don't answer them." Miles stumbled back, the flashlight shaking in his hand. The intercom clicked again. "Security to room 304. Code Blue. Repeat, Code Blue." This time, it wasn't the calm female voice. It was his own. The air grew colder. He backed into the hallway, glancing both ways. The corridor behind him was now completely dark, the one ahead flickering faintly. Shadows moved at the edges of the light, quick and fluid. Then came the tapping again, right behind him. He turned, flashlight jerking upward, and saw it. A figure in a hospital gown, head tilted sharply to one side, standing just inches away. Its eyes were black, its skin gray and thin. When it opened its mouth, the sound that came out wasn't a scream. It was the same tapping noise, loud and rhythmic. Miles bolted. His boots pounded against the tile, his radio screeching with feedback. The hall seemed to stretch longer the faster he ran. Doors on either side rattled violently as if something inside was trying to get out. "Tom! Anyone! Come in!" He shouted into the radio, but only the tapping answered. He reached the stairwell, shoving the door open. The entire building shuddered. The lights overhead flickered one last time before exploding in a shower of sparks. He climbed the stairs two at a time, lungs burning, and burst back into the main hallway of the upper floor. Everything was dark. The emergency lights glowed faint red, casting long shadows. He sprinted toward the security office, slamming the door behind him. For a few moments there was silence. Then, slowly, the monitors on the desk flickered on, one by one. Every screen showed the same feed, the camera from room 304. The bed was empty, but on the far wall, new words appeared, written in jagged lines as if by invisible hands. "You answered." Miles stared, frozen, as the lights in the office dimmed. The static from the monitors grew louder until it became a steady drone. On the center screen, a figure stepped into view. It was him. Same uniform, same face, but his eyes were hollow, his expression lifeless. The double looked up, staring directly into the camera. Then the intercom came alive one final time, whispering through the crackle of static, "Security to room 304. The next morning, hospital staff found the security office locked from the inside. The monitors were still on, displaying only static. Miles's badge and flashlight were found on the desk, next to a half-finished cup of coffee. There was no sign of forced entry, no signs of struggle. The last radio transmission, recorded at 3:07 a.m., contained one word, barely audible through the static: "Copy." The narrator's voice drops low, each syllable deliberate and cold. Some nights, when the hospital is quiet and the halls are empty, the old intercom still crackles to life. And from somewhere deep inside the sealed wing, a calm voice whispers, "Security to room 304. The wind howled outside the isolated factory as Victor began his midnight rounds. The building, once a thriving textile plant, now served as a storage site for forgotten machinery and outdated tools. Most nights were silent, just the rhythmic groan of pipes and the occasional drip of condensation hitting the concrete. But tonight felt different. The air was thicker, heavier, and his flashlight seemed weaker than usual, its beam fading at the edges like the dark was swallowing it whole. Victor had been on this job for over a decade. He'd seen rats the size of cats, heard strange echoes from the empty floors, and even caught trespassers trying to strip copper from the walls. Nothing ever truly scared him, but something about the way the shadows pooled around the corners tonight made his pulse quicken. The security cameras had been glitching since his shift started, cycling through static every few minutes. He'd written it off as old wiring, but now, deep in the heart of the building, he wasn't so sure. He passed the production floor, rows of rusted sewing machines still standing like a graveyard of industry. A single bulb flickered above, casting slow-moving shadows across the room. Then, from behind one of the machines, came the sound of soft footsteps. Not hurried, measured, careful. Victor stopped cold. "Who's there?" His voice echoed. Silence. He raised his flashlight, its beam cutting through layers of dust. No one. Then, faintly, a low hum started. A woman's voice, soft, melodic, humming an old tune. It came from somewhere deep in the factory, near the old manager's office. Victor swallowed hard and followed it, his boots crunching on shattered glass. The tune was familiar, like something he'd heard in childhood. As he drew closer, the humming stopped. He stepped into the office and froze. A woman stood in the corner, her back turned, long black hair falling over a faded uniform. Her clothes were decades out of date, like something from the factory's prime. She was motionless. Victor's breath hitched. "Ma'am, this area's restricted," he said, trying to steady his voice. The woman didn't move. Then, slowly, she tilted her head, not turning around, just tilting it at an impossible angle, until a sharp cracking sound filled the air. The lights flickered violently. When they steadied again, she was gone. Victor stumbled back, flashlight shaking. He scanned the room. Nothing but overturned chairs and broken windows. He hurried toward the exit, his heart pounding, but as he passed the wall of old time cards, he noticed one slot marked with a name, A. Varga, clocked in. Every other card had been blanked out with dust, except hers. He frowned. There hadn't been any E. Varga on record for years. Then all the clocks in the room began ticking at once, their second hands spinning rapidly until they all stopped. Exactly at 3:33. The hum returned, louder now, echoing through the hallways. Victor turned toward the sound, his flashlight flickering. Down the long corridor at the far end, the woman stood again. This time she was facing him, her eyes hollow and black, her mouth still moving as if she were humming. But no sound came out. He ran. Through the maze of machines, through the narrow stairwell, through the freezing air that now carried the faint scent of burning cloth. Behind him, the hum grew distorted, mechanical, echoing through every floor like it was following him through the intercom system itself. When he reached the exit door and pushed, it wouldn't budge. His flashlight died completely. The last thing he saw in the faint glow from the emergency light was a figure behind him. Her hand reaching out, skin pale and stretched thin, fingertips brushing his shoulder. The hum stopped. Silence. The next morning, Victor's car was found still running outside the factory gates. His clipboard lay on the seat, and the building's main alarm system showed no sign of disturbance. But on every security feed, each frozen at 3:33 m.m. A faint outline of a woman could be seen standing behind him, her head tilted, her lips forming the same silent tune.